Greetings from the galaxy far, far away. This is the Fandom Nation Andor Season 2, Episode 7 through 9 review. I am your host, Johnny, and it is truly a pleasure to be here with you on this fine Wednesday night if you're watching us live. And if you're not, whenever you are, I hope you're enjoying it. Obviously, if you haven't watched the episodes yet, we are deep diving, spoilers aplenty. So if you haven't watched yet, go watch them, then come back. If you care about spoilers, if you don't, sit here, watch, listen, enjoy us break down, talk about it, discuss it, and then decide. Maybe you want to go back and watch for yourself after we're done talking about it. But joining me tonight, as always, my usual co-host here on Fandom Nation, Randy. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. Actually, got through all 3 episodes today, and yeah, I know we're going to get into it, but it's definitely left quite the impact on me. I just can't stop thinking about episode 8. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna have a lot to talk about over the course of these 3 episodes. Sean, how about you? How you doing tonight?
I feel the cold getting worse, which kind of sucks, but and I'm exhausted, running on fumes. I think 6 hours sleep in the last 2 days combined. So I'll be looking forward to when this is done. Who am I kidding? I'm probably gonna go. Well, yeah, I'll probably go to bed actually after this. But man, what a cathartic experience is probably how I would word it as a Star Wars fan, but also as a human being living in the year 2025. And sorry, I'm not going to hold back any punches. That is a reference to what's going on planet Earth right now. That is a reference to what's going on in the United States of America. And whether you agree with me or not, that is completely your right. But from where I stand, and not just in the US, there's other places in the world too. So it's not just that. The most relevant piece of media, meaning TV show or movie, and not just Star Wars, period, in 2025. And I don't know if I ever thought I'd say that about Star Wars again.
Yeah, I mean, I felt watching Daredevil last month that it was hitting pretty topically, for something that was written as far back
Big
as it
moments
was.
in there too.
And then you follow that up with Andor,
Both
where
of
you
these
hit on
shows,
it.
by
It's
the
like
way, both of these shows, like, it's not like it's in response to what's going on right now. These things were filmed a while back.
Prior to November, which, if you understand, you realize that was kind of a tipping point for where we're at now versus where we might have been. So it's, But I digress. We're not here to talk about real world politics. We're here to talk about intergalactic politics. So let's get right down to it. No, Swasan, you kind of wove yours in there. Do you expound on anything initially, or are you feeling good with what you said there?
I didn't get time to do a graphic, and I so badly wanted to because I wanted the graphic to speak for my initial thought. So I will say this. In terms of Star Wars movies, in terms of Star Wars TV, I have Empire at 1,
Mm-hmm.
Revenge of the Sith at 2, Andor Season 2 Arc 3 at 3. And I've watched episodes 8 and 9 twice now, so it's not just a first-time viewing. That hit even harder the second time. And while I had some high expectations as we knew the event that was going to unfold, even as a Star Wars fan, I didn't think I was going to have this kind of experience. Very emotional, man.
Randy, what about you? Initial thoughts, feelings, emotions?
Yeah, it was one of those things where, it's 7. We were just like, it's like, okay, everything's getting set up. And then you go roll into 8. And by the end of it, I found myself definitely emotional. And the thing is, it's not because of like any major character or anything like that. It was the entire situation that unfolded before me that clearly I wasn't I wouldn't be able to handle if it was something that I truly had to face in real life. And it was just one of those things where it sticks with you. It's everything that happened, everything that was said, everything that was done. You just it's just been rattling around my brain ever since I watched it. And then of course going into 9 and everything that happened there, and obviously, at least we got a little bit of a nod to what one of the things I'd hoped they wouldn't change. Uh, that kind of helped, but the way it ended, and yeah, it was just one big gigantic roller coaster that I clearly was a fan of. I didn't want to get off it.
It was, if you've watched these reviews that we've done for this season, and you've watched, our breakdowns of season 1 that we did last month when I watched it for the first time, you'd know that this series has not really hit for me. It just hasn't. It's been okay. Some episodes have been good, even a few that were kind of bordering towards the upper tier. But this arc, independent of everything else, was cinema. It was. If I had not watched a single prior episode of Andor in season 1 or season 2, and we'd just chosen this arc to do, damn. Like, it's. There are events in Star Wars that are, we've heard referenced for a long time. We've speculated for a long time in what they were. And obviously they changed, a major event in this from what we had, been sort of pre-told in years past, what the event was, and changed it in such a way that made it better, I dare say. And getting to finally see, if there's one critique I've always had in Star Wars, is that usually the politics are bland. It's just they're there detrimentally, because usually when you see the politics, it's the long boring walks and talks and the the Senate scenes, and there's usually a lot of Jar Jar. But this was, if you know me personally, you know that one of my favorite series of all time is The West Wing. Aaron Sorkin writing that show, and that Mon Mothma speech was just everything about it, like, it felt so, it was just intense, epic, amazing. It was everything I wanted it to be, and 1,000 times more. It was, that speech was, I dare say, award worthy in and of itself. That speech was award worthy. Do I think it's going to get the love it probably deserves? No, because it's a Star Wars Disney Plus series. It's not going to get any award love, but
Andor
I think it absolutely should.
Andor season
yeah, but
1?
it was for mostly visual stuff, though.
I'm gonna have to go back and check on that one. I don't want to spend too much time here, but it would be criminal for Genevieve O'Reilly to not be nominated for an Emmy, and this show shouldn't just be nominated; it should be the automatic win.
Yeah, like for Genevieve especially. I didn't. Maybe you could go Skarsgård from the male side, but as far as I think part of it's going to depend what category they try and put it forward for. That's going to be
drama.
Another thing.
It's drama.
Well, and I know that, but I mean, limited series, short series, regular series. There's some of that drama and politics involved in it as well.
Probably got to be a regular series due to the amount of episodes, I would think.
I'm not sure how it qualifies or what it qualifies for specifically, because I think it's also in part what they put it forward for. But award seasons, we got a ways to go before we talk about that. But it is safe to say Genevieve O'Reilly definitely deserves flowers for her captivating performance. If nothing else, that speech in the Senate deserves love. It was wow.
Really quickly before we go any further, hey Zach, buddy, long time no see, man. You're always welcome at these parts, dude. Hope you're well. And as for Lightning McQueen's comment, I heard Tony Gilroy talk about this today, and he brought up a very good point. He said, 6,000 years here on planet Earth, how many times of actual, peace is there? And it's not very often, especially not right now. But even if it was based on term one, so fucking what? Deal with it.
No, but I mean, like, even that, from a sense of it is based at least on that, but it definitely probably hits a little too close to home for a lot of people.
You mean a lot of fanatics who put not one politician, any
party
politician
above people
on a pedestal? Did you get your feelings hurt a little bit? Too fucking bad. Sorry.
I'll say this: if any of that hurts your feelings, you should take a long, hard look at your feelings.
Yeah, or take a long, hard look at what's going on planet Earth and pull your head out of your ass. Sorry.
No arguments there. So let's bring this back to the galaxy far, far away, because that is what we're here to talk about.
Isn't this the galaxy far, far away at this point? Anyway, what do we got, man?
Well, we're going to start off, obviously, as if you watched us do, we didn't unfortunately get to do the episodes last week, so we've only done the first one, but we like to break things down a little differently. Instead of going episode by episode, we sort of go by locations and events within the episodes, so that we can break it. This one kind of breaks down evenly across the 3 episodes, just because of the way these 3 episodes were. Each episode was very centrally located to one location. But we're going to start things off with... my brain took a second to process, because in the notes we have episode 1, episode 2, and it's like, wait a minute. Obviously we mean 7 and 8, but we're going to start with the first episode of this particular arc, and we're going to the Force Healer. We're going to talk about the Force Healer and that. And Randy, why don't you go first here with this and talk about the Force Healer? What were you thinking when that particular portion of the scene occurred?
Yeah, it definitely caught me off guard, just because even though it's Star Wars, there's Jedi, there's Sith, the idea of having a Force healer coming around to help people out, which is I definitely commend in the sense of it's doing the right thing, which is something I'll always be a believer in. I didn't really foresee the Force really interjecting here a little bit, but then here we are. I thought it was interesting in the fact that one thing we've always known about the Force is a Jedi or Force user will get visions, but as Yoda's always said, that you can never really determine. Essentially, don't quote me on this, but it's like you can't really determine exactly what you're seeing. It's like sometimes the Force is trying to tell you something and you could misinterpret it, kind of similarly to the prophecy of the Chosen One. So obviously she saw something in Andor's future, and it kind of you could tell that it was disturbing yet I would say refreshing, but it was like confirmation for something that she clearly had seen previously that we didn't get to see. Obviously, Cassian isn't exactly a fan of the Force, based on his reaction, or he was just kind of disturbed by the fact that the Force healed him. One of the two. I really couldn't figure it out. I just knew it kind of bothered him a little bit, and I can understand that. That's not something you regularly deal with. It's something crazy to have happen. But I do feel like this whole thing kind of plays into Bix's decision in the end of at episode 9. So if you're not even really paying attention to it, it's like her reaction to it. The fact she's like, "What did you see?" And then you cut away. So I clearly believe that whole scene right there was basically foreshadowing Bix's leaving at the end, which is it's sad, but I know we'll get there. But the Force, that's the craziness of the Force, man. That's what it's always been doing, in whether it's books, games, movies, shows, whatever. It's always been that type of you basically have to interpret it in your own way. And yeah, it was. I mean, overall, it was nice to see them like together on Yavin and surviving. But clearly, you can tell over the past year that whatever's been going on with Cassian, it's definitely taken his toll on him, and he's definitely worn down.
Since you brought it up, a prophecy misread could have been. Was Yoda's quote on prophecy. I looked that up while you were talking. Sean, what about you? Force healer. What did you think?
So many thoughts when it comes to that, man. I think a lot of people will jump to the, well, why is he so taken back by it? And the simple fact is, the Force is, for, like, in terms of public appearance, is gone. You know, remember the path, whether you're watching Kenobi, reading some of the novels that mention it, most recently, Tales of the Underworld. That's not necessarily the rebels, right? Like, people jump to that conclusion that it is, but there's nothing that actually says that it is, and it can very well be its own thing. So by my calculations, even from a Bail Organa perspective, in terms of what we know in canon, he only knows Kenobi's out there. That's it. There's no proof that anyone else is out there.
As far as actual Force presenting,
For sure.
I agree with that. And obviously, he knows Luke and
He
Leia
knows
are
of Palpatine,
likely.
Vader, so, and he knows there's Inquisitors. But in terms of public appearance, and in reference to the Jedi, everybody, like, it's gone, right? Like, and it's been gone for almost 2 decades at this point. And Cassian at this point is what, maybe late 20s, early 30s at most?
Somewhere in there.
And so for me, it's like, that makes sense for him to be taken back a bit by this. The Han Solo of it all, if you will. I've flown from one side of the galaxy to the other, and I've never seen one mystical force that controls everything. And you'll like what I'm about to say, I think, here, Johnny.
Okay.
Is when George Lucas did the original trilogy, and we listened to the lessons taught to us by Ben Kenobi and Yoda, it's not about a midichlorian count. Everybody potentially could have access to the Force on different levels. And if you were paying attention, you found out last night Cassian does to an extent. And if you pay attention to the novels, so does Han Solo. It's not black and white. It's shades of gray, the way Star Wars was meant to be. And I like the prequels. And if you ask me to pick between the prequels and the original, I like the prequels better. But if we're talking about how Star Wars was designed to be, it's not black and white. It's shades of gray. The Empire was the United States of America, and the Rebel Alliance, I think we talked about this last night, was Vietnam. And I like how uncomfortable he is about it. And even Bix is like, it feels better, doesn't it? As if he's in like denial about it. In denial that he can be anything more than lucky. And he even brings it up again in episode, I call it episode 3, arc 3, but episode 9. Sorry, guys. Daughter's trying to get down to bed. But I really liked the way they handled the Force healer. And I liked her perspective of it, too. It was almost like, I don't really know why I'm here sort of thing. I'm just pulled towards you. And I thought it was very moving and very powerful.
Yeah, it fit sort of, I don't want to say what we think of the Force to be prior to the prequels, but it definitely sort of had that um, mysticality to it that I like my Force to have. That's my biggest. If you've been around here long enough, my biggest critique of the prequels is midichlorians. Just like you said, I don't like. I never liked science in what was otherwise sort of almost faith-ish. In the way the Force worked and the way the Jedi worked, and that sort of thing. So I was, I liked that. I liked that element of it better. That monastic monk style of existence that the Jedi were painted as in the original trilogy versus what we then saw in the prequel trilogy. So any opportunity to dip your toe back into that water, I like seeing personally. I think Cassie and Bix also mentioned that he had a bad experience with a Force healer with his mother about 10 years ago, I think. So and I think that sort of also painted into his, feelings surrounding a Force healer. Where obviously, if you came across a shaman healer who was fake, it would definitely sort of paint an image that, oh well, they're just all frauds, they're all phonies. It's like faith healers. You
Let's not forget about everybody falling. I mean, it's the Rebel Alliance, so they're not really falling for the lie, but
Mhm.
the galaxy, and not to jump too far ahead here, you hear it in episode 9 or episode 3 of Arc 3, the final episode we've seen so far, the one that felt more like a series finale other than that last scene than it did, episode 7, 8, 9, is the galaxy has been made to believe the Jedi turned on the
Mhm.
Senate and turned on Palpatine, and that they were the bad ones, and so like there's this stigma around
Mhm.
the Force too.
Yeah, they've definitely been painted as the bad guys. And I don't want to say kudos to them, but if there's one thing we've learned in this series is that the Empire has learned the value of propaganda, and they have done an incredibly amazing smear campaign of the Jedi who, for centuries prior to this had been, I don't want to say the police force of the world, but they've been the conscience of the Senate. And
Were you paying attention to what the senators were saying before Mothma took the speech?
before Mothma, I'd been hearing it, um, but most of it was just sort of propaganda washing, and it just kind of went in one side and out the other.
So uh, they're buying into, and we don't know if that senator is in the Empire's
Mhm.
pocket or if they're one of the senators that just believes in what's being sold in terms of the propaganda.
Yeah.
But they're going on about how about the fallen Imperials in the Corrin
Mhm.
attack. And one of the things I love is how unfazed Mon Mothma is by it. I know jumping ahead, but like it, it's incredible, and the healer portion was great too. We do have a super chat if you want to read it,
Yep. I
man.
was just going to bring us to that before we move to our next topic. Jerry, with a super chat. Andor is 10 to 15 years after Revenge of the Sith, but the rebellion is still in its infancy. You'd think the rebellion would have been about 3 to 5 years in, not just barely forming after 2 decades. Um, you'd think that, but if we've learned from anything from the Empire, is that they're very good at making you think everything is going their way. It we have we don't really see the bigger, broader picture as much as we think we do, because we are sort of uh, pigeonholed into only seeing the specific things and places they want us to see.
Several rebel cells
I,
too.
I was going to say it's safe to it is very safe to imagine that Gorman is not the only planet with an underground resistance that just
Well, we
doesn't
know.
have anything to pull it together galactically.
Think about where. Think about it. Let's go back to Aldani for a second. Season 1.
Mhm.
So, Cass meets Vel. Luthen introduces them. It's not like that's their first mission. That's not the implication that's going on. The implication is going on that they've been doing this for a while.
Mhm.
So rebel cells have been probably at this for, the better part of there's 19 years between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. And it's probably been going on for about half that time. But pulling a bunch of rebel cells together that probably have different agendas, now that's the hard part. And we see that in Rogue One. It's still, you have people bitching about what's the right thing to do and what's not the right thing to do and when to do it. And
Well, perfect example is Saw Gerrera and hitting the
Yeah.
rebels he has.
Yep. We had
Jerry, do me a favor. I want to run something by you. If you can reach out to me, I don't know if you have Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. Find a way to reach out to me so I can contact you away from this chat privately. I want to run something by you, man. But
we just never seen the rebellion in its cohesion because it doesn't have any cohesiveness. It's splintered, it's fractured, it's planetary, it's not galactic. There's no unification. And I think another big factor is they never win. That was a big point of Rogue One, that the rebels had never won. There was no great victory for the rebels
no big
until
win, anyway.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But like everything had always been, the victories had been small and
They
planetary.
were mosquitoes essentially. They
Exactly.
bite at you, but
they'd never dealt an undeniable blow to the Empire until Rogue One. And that's a big thing. That's also the first time the Empire started unleashing their super weapons. So the rest of the galaxy can kind of be like, whoa, wait a minute. You're literally destroying planets now. That's not good for anybody. Can't deny that anymore.
What do we got next, man?
But, let's move it along, move it forward. Next up, well, let's jump right into it, okay? The Gorman Massacre. We're going to get right down to the meat and potatoes here. We're going to get down to big business. Obviously, from canon to Andor, we changed. The Gorman Massacre we'd known beforehand has become the Tarkin incident. Now we have the Gorman Massacre. Obviously, beautiful. It was very well shot, very well acted, very well directed. What was going through your mind when the first shot rang out and everything went to hell? Sean?
Look, at the end of the day, this is Star Wars, right, guys? Like, yeah, we did watch Anakin burn up at the side of a lava pit, and it was very graphic, even for a PG-13 movie. I was unsure how much of it they would actually show present. Like, I thought we might see a handful of people die and then fill in the blank. But not only did we see, like, you'd have to watch it in slow motion to see how many people we watched die in that. Like, I did catch on my second view, like, it's not just the people who are dying that are front and center in the shots. If you're looking at the background, there are people being shot in the background too. And like, I never thought they'd be that. If Tony Gilroy had done Revenge of the Sith, we would have actually seen what happened inside of the temple and not like a short little blip of it.
We would have had our first rated R Star Wars movie.
Yeah, and this is very close to that, if I'm being frank. It's emotional. The score, we're going to get to Cyril's topic after this, but Star Wars did Terminator better than Terminator's done Terminator since Terminator 2. With the KX units coming out and
that was brutal for sure.
That I don't know if they could have executed it better than what they did. And yet it was emotional. It's not supposed to be a fist pumping watch. It's supposed to be a jaw dropping watch and like oh wow, they're really showing all this. Oh shit. Muted, good sir.
That's always helpful. Okay, I just one day, I'd just like one episode where nobody gets attacked by the mute monster. Just one. Is that too much to ask? Uh, Randy, what about you?
Yeah, it was. I literally sitting there just kind of watching, and I'm just like, okay, so things are. I could tell it's one of those things where you build up is the music, everything, and you know things are about to go down, but the way everything happened and just like the raw emotion from people who it's like this is what I thought I wanted, but now I'm not sure I wanted this. Like watching, friends and family die and loved ones, and just absolutely just the terror from everything, and all because the Empire planned it that way from the word go. Like it was, I was like, I just thought for sure maybe the Gormans really would have started it, but no, it was the Empire firing the first shot out of nowhere. So automatically it's assumed it's the Gormans. And as things went on and watching things through the way Cassian was seeing it, and how devastated Cyril was, which it looked like he had just his brain got fried and he just didn't know what to make of it all. Like it's clearly not what he wanted. Watching him just kind of be numb through the whole thing. And like I said earlier, it was one of those things where the emotions ran high, and it wasn't because of any one individual dying. It was just the lack of empathy from the Empire, just the mass genocide of it all, that it was heartbreaking. I mean, but it was like it was engaging. It kept my attention. It made me feel things and think about things that, it's not always in the front of your mind at any given day. But like I said, I can't even stop thinking about it because it was so well done and it was so horrifying. And yeah, it's good. This is gonna be one of those episodes where every time I see it, it's just probably gonna haunt me for a few days until I can finally wrap my head around it.
It's the perfect example of the butterfly effect. And by saying that, I mean, there was always going to be, a rebel uprising. It was always going to happen eventually. But this event occurring in the way that it did became something that the rest of the galaxy couldn't ignore anymore. And despite the way they went about organizing it and playing their cards and doing it the way that they did by clearly, framing the Gorman people to being the ones who took the first shot, it became so much more than that. And they could have got away with a lot less and probably still achieved the goal they were after. But going as extreme as they did made it something that could not be ignored. And then trying to, I don't want to say ignore it, but trying to wrap it up the way they did, just, it shows you that propaganda and that style of authoritarian fascism, dictatorship, whatever you want to, whatever pigeonhole you want to cram the Empire into, that it can only go so far before you lose control of it. This was the point where they lost control. They just don't know it yet. And I thought it was beautiful, like from a visual standpoint, obviously, because you could feel the build to the crescendo. Like you could feel the emotions and everything building, and just the climb towards that moment where the Imperial, not the ISB spy, whatever I don't know exactly which designation. I'm assuming he was ISB. Took that shot and set everything off, just building towards that moment, interweaving Cassian and Dedra and Cyril and Will and all of the members of the Gorman Resistance, and all of those things interweaving through it, that you're sort of watching it, picking it apart and going, where's it going to happen? What's going to happen? How's it going to happen? Because you know what's coming, you just don't quite know how it's coming yet. Like, to the point when they were, when they were doing their chant, and then they started singing. Like, it just, there was a part of me that in that moment was like, oh, it's about to happen. It's about to happen. It's about to happen. And then it still kept building from that moment, where that was only more like the 2/3 to 3/4 mark of the actual build towards that crescendo. Like, there were moments within that were so intense and so holy crap, that they did most of it without the action, which was amazing. Building towards it, it was breathtaking. It was gorgeous. It was beautiful. The music cannot be subtle and underneath everything in such a way that it wasn't. Like, that's the thing. Like, and I don't mean this in any disrespect, but John Williams, the score is sort of more in your face in moments like this. Like, you would feel the music play a bigger part in the moment, which is one thing that John Williams does so well. Whereas this, the music was an undercurrent to the actions around it. You know what I mean? Like, it was the flow of the stream, and everything that was happening in the stream is where your attention was. Your attention wasn't on the moving water. It was on the sticks and the animals and everything weaving its way around the river, which made it great and beautiful and amazing. And like, it just, I cannot say enough good things about that scene, about that moment, building to it, because it's something we've been building to for so long, not just within this season, because obviously it's been building towards this moment, but even going back to season 1 and even further back than that, this was always an event that you sort of wondered how it played out. And yes, we had the the prior explanation from, I believe, the books. I think it was that explained the Gorman massacre when Tarkin landed his ship in the thing and killed a whole bunch of people, which is kind of a ridiculous way to go about it, but that's a whole other. That just did kind of go to show that Tarkin wasn't as smart as Tarkin thought he was, but I will leave that out. But the build to it, everything about it was just beautiful, and Cassian being a part of it, you could see his going back and forth between what he was there for versus what was going on. It was great, to the point that I think about 3 different times throughout the Gorman massacre, and I know I said this to Sean while I was watching it. I believe I called Cassian a bitch like 3 different times during the course of that for not taking the shot. It was only the last time he didn't take the shot where I was like, okay, yeah, well, you couldn't really take the shot, because which is what's going to lead us directly into our next point, which is, holy crap, guys, Cyril Karn. Like, that is, he stepped onto the stage in a major way in the middle of this arc, and holy moly, that is a character who, I'm going to tell you exactly what I said to Sean while I was watching it, and this was literally, it was the part of the Gorman Massacre after Cyril got into the Imperial headquarters, and he was in the room with Dedra and figuring out. It was the moment where the penny dropped for him that, holy crap, the Empire is what everyone thinks we are. Like, it was the moment he realized that we are the bad guys in a big way. And I said it exactly to Sean, the direct quote, well, look who peeked in his shorts and found a pair. Because Cyril Karn, he'd been pushed around. He'd been pushed around by the Empire. He'd been pushed around by Dedra. He'd been pushed around by his mother. He's a character who'd been pushed around. And even a little bit by Cassian, in the course of the first season. But he finally reached down and found himself in a moment that was undeniable. And, granted, putting hands on Dedra, a little don't want to say deserved, but heat of the moment, you can kind of look at it and be like, oh, but yeah, you blew up. And he blew up in a big way. Not right, but from a writing standpoint, right. Like, that makes sense? Like, not something you should ever do, but within the confines of this particular writing, the right expression of his breaking point. It broke him. He was a different man after that.
Well, and I think you can look at it as that's the reason his hands were around her throat. It was the idea of he finally snapped. He finally lost control. All that anger boiling to the surface and just finally erupting. And clearly he understood, that he had to let go. He had to let go. He let go. And she still was like, oh, don't worry. We're going to be able to get out of here. We're going to live together, so on and so forth. And and the fact that when you see that light bulb moment where he realizes what's exactly about to happen, and he just tries to go out there and find the people he'd been working with for so long,
mm-hmm.
and getting caught up in just once everything started, like I was saying, it's almost as if he was just numb. It's everything he worked towards, everything he thought he was working towards for just the betterment of the empire. And it's all a lie. Every single thing that he did was a lie, not only to the people of Gorman, but to himself. And you could see just how much it affected him, how much he believed in what he was doing, until the truth just slapped him square in the face. Clearly, waking up at the right moment when he realizes Cassian is about to take out Dedra, but still, it's just, yeah, it was the acting done with just his facial expressions alone was phenomenal. He didn't have to say anything. You could read it in his face, read it in his eyes, his body language. It was so well done, so well shot, that it's like you get to the point where you actually feel sorry for him and actually kind of take his side for a moment, until obviously he meets his end, which I did not see that coming that way. I figured it had been out in the middle of everything, but still, he had to get that one last fight in with Cassian before things went dark for him permanently.
I was more shocked in who took the shot than that the shot occurred. Like, in that moment there, when we had him on top of Cassian, throttling him, I was expecting it to be Will. That's who I thought it was going to be. Obviously, it wasn't. Sean, what about you? Seo Karn. What do
I think the character development that this guy goes through, from the guy that's being, sorry, my cat is being stupid. The character development that this guy goes through from the start of season 1 to when his, the people that answer to him are basically poking fun at him, and his speech to where he ends up is just incredible. I'd never heard of Kyle Soller before this show. I don't know him from anything else, but he deserves full points on the performance that he put in, especially this season, right? Like, this season is something else entirely. Connor, I think, in the chat, I haven't read his full thing here, but he says Cyril is a dark mirror to Cassian, a man who had every advantage but no love, always eager to prove something in a system that doesn't care about individualism but function. I think that's about as good as you could possibly say it. And I don't think he's trying to save Dedra there at the end. I think he sees Cassian, realizes it's Cassian, and there's this moment of, I'm responsible for part of what's going on, and so are you, and I'm going to take you out once and for all. And the real crime is he goes to put down his gun after Cassian says, who are you? It's this shock realization, and he gets plugged, which is, it's probably deserved due to the bad deeds that he was a part of committing during this time. And I'll say it, and this isn't going to be a popular thing. Dedra deserved to get choked, and I'll go one step further. He should have threw her off the fucking balcony because she deserved it big time.
We were yelling, "Chuck her off."
Yeah, we were literally like, "Chuck her off, chuck her off," and just blown away. And like at the end of the day, he's just a cog on the wheel. And Randy pointed out at the end, before it all goes dark for him, and shout out to Diego Luna and Kyle Soler on the fight, the hand-to-hand combat scene. Like that's right up there with something you'd see in like a Mission Impossible movie with Tom Cruise. And they released a little behind the scenes feature in it and how much went into it. Like I know he's gone now, but man, he deserves full points. And I know people are pointing out at the end of the episode when it shows his mom crying, and that they feel bad for her. I do not feel bad for that woman whatsoever. Maybe you shouldn't have been a complete see you next Tuesday to your son your entire life, and now you get to live with that guilt for the rest of your life.
I mean, don't be wrong. I feel bad for her in the sense of she lost a son. Like that's, from that standpoint, you got to feel that. But you can definitely be, you kind of, I don't want to say you made your bed here, but maybe now you can look in a mirror and realize you weren't the mother you thought you were.
Can you read this, Johnny?
I can. From O'Connor, Cyril's arc over these 2 seasons is brilliant. The nuance is just, I don't know how to appropriately convey a clapping emoji in speech. So we'll say clapping emoji. So many possibilities of what was going through his head in those last moments besides the blaster bolt. It's very accurate.
Always see as he's lowering his gun. Like,
yeah.
And we'll never know what was going to come next. And I think it makes sense that Cassian doesn't recognize him because Cassian barely laid eyes on the guy in season 1. Like, they ties him up, but other than that, it's more of Cyril constantly seeing him and seeing him as a Cassian, and they're chasing him down. And
I think for me, like, some people think that, and I've seen this in some comments online that, he was Imperial to the end. He went after Cassian. I don't think that's anything close to the reason why he went after Cassian.
I think you could tell that was personal.
To me, I think, like, even looking at his face, like, to me, the emotion I got out of this was, my life is over because of you. I'd just be a mindless cog in the machine if it wasn't for you. Like, I wouldn't. He'd still. Well, you mentioned this earlier when we were talking about the senators and the things they were saying before Mon Mothma's speech, that we weren't sure how many of them were just buying into the propaganda versus how many of them were true believers. And I think Cyril is sort of the flip side of that, where he's someone who did buy into the program and into the propaganda until he finally got to see. He finally got to see the man behind the curtain. In the Wizard of Oz sense, he's grown up seeing the Wizard of Oz, and now he realizes that the wizard is just a man, and that man is a monster. That was the realization I think he took, was realizing that we were about to kill an entire planet's worth of people for what? A meaningless medal? I think that's when the light finally went on for him, that he was, obviously he played a big part in that, and he's realizing just what is actually going on here. I thought it was great. It was amazing. It was, to me, he kind of stole the performance a little bit in this. Mon Mothma's performance in the
credit he deserves. Skarsgård and Genevieve O'Reilly and even Diego Luna in these episodes, like, I feel like he's going to be forgotten a little, and he shouldn't. Kyle Soler was fantastic.
If for nothing else, that episode, like that performance, those 10 minutes from the moment where he stopped, where he just walked away from Dedra and essentially walked away from the Empire, to the moment where he finally met his demise and finally met the man he thought was the monster that he was chasing. And I have to say, I read an interview with with him today with the actor who played Cyril, and I got to agree with him. I am very glad that they chose what they chose, because apparently they filmed that ending line of their conversation against, who are you? Apparently they filmed that a whole bunch of different ways, running from. Let me see if I can pull it up. This is a direct quote from him. He said this was to TV Line. You remember speaking to Tony Gilroy and Diego about this many, many times. They couldn't figure out what the last line in that scene should be. Is it, who are you? Is it you? Is it, why are you here? All those sort of different permutations. And in the end, they chose, who are you? Despite the fact they filmed it. I'm very, very happy that's the one they chose. Personally, I'd like to see the other takes, which hopefully, Star Wars has always been very good at showing us those sort of things. I do kind of hope we see some of those different takes in behind the scenes. Oh my God, Sean, I'm becoming you. I want to see behind the scenes stuff. What is happening? Oh, I don't like this. This feels wrong. I'm supposed to be the guy who's like behind the scenes, behind the schmeens. Now here I am. I actually want to see these alternate cuts to see if they chose the right one. This feels weird. I don't like this feeling. All right, Jerry, you're up on the chat. You're up on the screen here, so I'm gonna read this out. If you treat Rogue One like it doesn't exist, Andor is even better. You don't have to think about, oh well, blank is not in Rogue One, so they died here. I ignored the film, and Andor is superb.
My advice to anybody would be, if you plan on showing Andor to friends who maybe like Star Wars but backed out of it, if they've never seen Rogue One, do not let them watch Rogue One before seeing Andor Seasons 1 and 2. Allow them to see Andor Season 1, Andor Season 2, Rogue One, and follow that even with A New Hope, because it's relevant. I think you combine those 4 things together, and it now makes this sort of new arc of Star Wars.
I genuinely, after seeing this arc in particular, I genuinely look forward to watching Rogue One again in a few weeks when we do the watch along here on the channel. We don't have a 100% date for that. We know that is the plan. Once Andor finishes, we're going to do a Rogue One watch along.
I think it'll be probably a couple weeks from today, is my guess.
Yeah, that's about what I figured. I was going to say early June, likely, but it's. I look forward to seeing it again, like to the point, and this is going to set, like, for me, this feels so like, oh God, I can't believe it, because I couldn't believe it when the thought crossed my mind last night when I was watching this. And I said I was texting you while you were kind of barely staying awake and seeing the messages. I got to the end of this episode and I'm like, shit, I want to watch Rogue One now. Like, and that's like, hold on a minute, this is me saying, and these were genuine thoughts and emotions that I had. Like, I haven't watched Rogue One since a snowy day when Sean and I were at a theater, talking about it. Like, I haven't watched Rogue One since. And I genuinely last night was like, damn, I want to watch Rogue One.
I will say this about Rogue One and Andor. The acting is so superb in Andor. You have a bunch of people that should be nominated for Emmys. That when you go and watch Rogue One again, I haven't seen Rogue One in about 2 years or so, I think. Sorry, it got really dark in here. 1 second. That Felicity Jones' performance in Rogue One is going to look and feel worse than it already did, because I think she's far and away the worst part of that movie. Not that the character is not super relevant, because it is, and it's important. And I don't think Felicity Jones is a bad actor, but for whatever reason, she is she's the sore spot in that movie in terms of performance, and I think it's going to be even more glaring now.
It's just one of those instances where you put a performer in a certain role that you think is going to work great, and even in test screenings and auditions looks great. And then you put it on screen, and by the time you realize, oh, this doesn't work the way we thought it did, it's too late. I think that's a little bit of what happened with Felicity Jones. She was popular at the time and doing good performance-wise, that it just took them a long time to realize that, oh, this type of film isn't her strong suit, don't do
Lightning McQueen, because we're going to end the show with those.
Don't you stop right there. Don't. damn you for putting that thought in my head now. That because I don't want that. We'll get to the ending in a few minutes because I have thoughts. But we'll get to that when we get to that. But we do still have a few things to get to before then. Obviously, we didn't get a chance to talk about it last week because obviously we didn't do an episode last week because real life does that sometimes. Obviously, the big change to come out of season 2 of Andor is for the first time in major Star Wars, we have recast a relatively major player. Now, obviously, we're not to the level of the big three or, the big four, if you want to include Obi-Wan in that list, who in and of itself has already been recast, but that's a bone of contention for another day. We did not have Jimmy Smits available for this. He was, from what I gather, he was filming the short-lived East New York series. He was filming a cop show for CBS, I think, at the time they were filming this. So we didn't get Jimmy Smits. And obviously Bail Organa is a big part of this second season, specifically these last... he had his moment in the previous arc, but he was a big part of this arc. With Jimmy Smits unavailable, they recast with Benjamin Bratt. What did you think? What's your thoughts? Did it work? Did it not work? Are you happy they did it? Are you mad they did it? Do you wish they had have used another senator instead of Organa so they wouldn't have to recast? What's your thoughts on Jimmy not being there, Benjamin Bratt being there, and Bale's appearances all wrapped up into one? Sean?
No, I'm handing off to Randy for this one because he brought it up to me earlier.
Oh boy, okay.
It's not a bad thing. No, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's one of those things where I feel like it was well done. He gave the same, I guess, the same aura, like the same type of feeling you would get if Jimmy Smits was playing Organa in this one. It was like, okay, he had to recast it. That's cool. And he what they've given him, he did great. And honestly, it didn't bother me in the least. I feel like this is one of those things where you could make the argument, it's okay to recast. And I think we're going to see the same thing with Ahsoka season 2. Obviously, different circumstances, but it's the idea of it's time, because there are many stories that the big three are involved in that we haven't told yet. This is proof that a recast can work. And I think it's time that that's something Disney needs to really start to think about, is if you're going to get your more popular characters screen time, it's time to recast the big three. It just is. And I think this is a good first step.
I'll second that. I agree with everything Randy said. Benjamin Bratt is fantastic, to a point where if they were to do more where they need Bale, I don't think they'll think twice about possibly getting him involved if Jimmy's not available. And I'll go one step further. Jimmy may have lost his spot at this point. And that's not a bad thing. And it's, I don't know where more Bale would pop up. Certainly there's an opportunity with at least talks about Kenobi 2 going on now finally. But I think he was incredible. And you could not do this. Okay, like, to be clear, I know you asked the question, Johnny. It does not work without Bail Organa. He has to be there. He is way too big of a chess piece to not have involved in these events. It would be very alarming if he wasn't there, frankly. And Tony Gilroy was never, ever in a million years going the deep fake route.
For me, I personally had no issue with it because I love both these guys. I love Jimmy Smits and I love Benjamin Bratt. I've been a fan of Benjamin Bratt since the early 90s.
Like Sandra Bullock movies, do you?
No, actually, it's because of Law and Order.
Well, I was going to say Demolition Man for me, but
For me, it was Law and Order. Right, my mom's a huge.
Congeniality?
Well, I like that movie, but that's because it was,
Uh,
of the time, it was fun.
uh,
It wasn't. It's not a good movie.
couldn't access
It's a
any
fun
of the
movie.
porn back then, could you? Huh?
Buddy, it was 2002. Neither of us had good access to porn then.
Was it really 2002 that movie came out? I thought
It was
came
early 2000s.
I
Yeah,
thought it
it
was
was.
late 90s.
No, I'm pretty sure it was 2002.
Wow.
But no, I mean,
Feel a little better about that.
for me it was Law and Order. My mom loved watching Law and Order. I still love watching Law and Order personally. So I love, he was a detective on Law and Order for a very long time. That's where I first started liking his work. But like, I don't want to say that, as far as recasting go, I think it showed that in the right vein it can work. Because you cast an actor who's very similar, both from sort of a historical stuff. Like if you were to look up both of their IMDb pages, they are very sort of parallel to each other, to the point that I'm almost 1,000% willing to bet that both of these guys read for Bale in '98. I nobody said that. And
it would be like 2001. They had someone else cast as Bale in Phantom Menace, and they cut it.
Okay, but like I to me, I feel like I find it hard to believe that both of these guys didn't read for this role at the time, because I feel like they probably were up for a lot of the same roles, both from sort of that standpoint where they both fit the same sort of physical criteria. They're both very good at specific things. These are both two guys who excelled in the '90s playing cops. Benjamin Bratt on Law and Order, Jimmy Smits on NYPD Blue. Like these are two guys who paralleled each other a great deal in their acting careers to the point that I think the only real thing that I don't think Benjamin Bratt has done that Jimmy Smits has done is Jimmy Smits has success in political roles, which I think really helped him. He was in The West Wing around the same time as he would have been playing Bale, actually, now that I think about it.
I still can't believe he played Nero on Sons of Anarchy, and that's Jimmy Smits. Like, it looks like Jimmy Smits, obviously, but like, it's a very different role.
Like, your brain doesn't correlate to that. So it's just like these are two guys whose careers have paralleled each other in such a way that interweaving them to the point that while we were doing this, I actually Googled it to see, like, because I was sure it would have happened at some point or another that these two had sort of replaced each other in projects before, but I can't find anything of that. But it's hard to say if one was cast for something and then replaced by the other at a different point. But like I said, their careers were very parallel to each other. Their skill sets are very similar to each other, and it works. It fits. Going from one to the other. It just, I love it. I think it's great. I think it is as far as recastings go, I think this is the perfect test case to show that it can work, as long as you don't go sort of, I don't want to say off the rails with it, but you need similar people, you need similar skill sets. Like, you need to look at one performance and the other performance and not be like, oh, they're so night and day. They're so different. Whereas if you look at a Jimmy Smits performance as Bale, and then you look at Ben's performance specifically in the Senate, like, it's a wash. Like, if you take out Jimmy and put in Ben, or you take out Ben and put in Jimmy, you're not losing anything in the performance, and it goes to show you that in a big way that I think this works as a proof of concept that you can recast these roles, and it can work in such a way that let's be honest, had it failed, like from a standpoint of the fans, like had we seen this and been like, oh, this is garbage, this doesn't work, I don't think we'd lose a lot. And it would just sort of be that counterpoint to us sitting here saying, you can do this, it can be done, for them to say, well, it didn't work here, and it didn't work in a major way. Whereas I sort of feel the opposite happening here. And I think kudos to Tony Gilroy, who in an interview pointed out that they introduced Bale in episode 6.
Well, Arc 2, anyways. I know where you're going.
Yeah. Like in the end of Arc 2, when they introduced him for the exact purpose of getting the fan reaction out of the way before he actually has to do any real work, which kudos to him. That is a very intelligent thing to do it gave all of us, you know, podcasters and fans and just everyone just a chance to be like, whoa, do I like this? Do I not like this? How do I feel about this? It gave us a week to digest it before we came back to it.
Lightning Queen says, do you guys do this every week? Always looking for non-annoying Star Wars streams. You guys seem cool. Hope you understand the confusion with my first chat earlier. That my response wasn't directed specifically at you. My response is directed at the fanatics out there that put politicians on a pedestal and raise them up as if they're some sort of gift to mankind. And then they get offended if you say one thing that they don't like. That's what I was. So no worries there. And apologies if it came across like I was directing it just at you. But yes, we do this every week. But it's important to note that we are not just a Star Wars channel. We cover wrestling here. It's usually one big live stream show that we do. And we used to do a bunch of pre-produced content. And we'll try to do more of that. But like our shows are usually anywhere from an hour to 2 hours, usually closer to 2 hours, where we're covering, horror movie stuff, whether it's Halloween, Crystal Lake, any of the other stuff that's going on, or wrestling. We talk a lot of wrestling. We're covering some of the Avengers stuff that's coming up with the movies there. But our Star Wars section usually does take up a pretty decent chunk of the show. So as always to anybody, I know there's a few new people on tonight's stream right now who I haven't seen before. Definitely like, comment, subscribe, and our Star Wars content will definitely continue. It's not going anywhere even after Andor.
If there's something to talk about, we'll talk about it. Sean and I have been doing Star Wars podcasting since
June 2015.
I was literally going to be like, I had this. I was going to say this last night when we were talking about how unprepared our shows used to be in the first show. I was going to be like, I have a 10-page script from the very first episode we did, just slightly to my right, that says that's not true.
Might have to drag Mondo's ass on here for an episode in June
but I digress. We've been doing this Star Wars for about 10 years. Sean and I have. The third member of the panel has kind of changed here and there, but Randy's now been with us for 2.5 years.
Yeah, I think it was right around just before Ahsoka dropped.
Yeah.
Is when I started.
So Randy's pretty consistently filled that third slot for us for the last couple of years, so hopefully it continues. We're all having a great time. We're enjoying it. But if there's Star Wars news to talk about, we'll talk about it. If there's no Star Wars news to talk about, there's still a 50% or greater chance that we're still going to talk about Star Wars. So,
and now and then we do Star Wars trivia. So,
we do. Nobody's happy when we do it, but
by nobody he means him and only him.
That's not inherently true. Have you changed the theme? Because that might be true if we didn't have to listen to that god-awful dubstep theme you chose 6-7 years ago to annoy me and continue to use to this day.
What makes you think that's going to change? Seriously, what makes you think that's going to
change?
change?
Prayer?
I didn't agree to change that. Sorry, man, you're stuck.
Hope and prayer, really, Randy? That's really all there is to it. But no, if there's something to talk about, we'll talk about it. And if there's not something to talk about it, we'll probably talk about something anyway. But all right, let's get back to this. Let's move on. We've only got a couple more things left to discuss here in regards to this episode.
To be clear, with future streams, our main streaming night is Tuesday nights, not Wednesdays. Not that we'll never be on here on Wednesdays. If we do, it'll be late like this. But our main streaming night's Tuesdays, and we usually launch at around 8:30 or so p.m. and usually go till about 10:30 or so.
Yeah, the Wednesday nights are right now we're doing them because of the nature of the drops of episodes. There's no way for us to properly watch them on Tuesday night, record on Tuesday night, and put out our reviews then. So that left us with Wednesday night, and as Sean said, wrestling.
Listen, Johnny and I were doing reviews to Obi-Wan Kenobi at like 4:00 in the morning when it came out, and I just don't have the ability to do that anymore.
We're older now. It's not, if this was 10 years ago, yeah, we'd be doing that because 10 years ago we'd be doing random Star Wars discussions until 2-3 o'clock in the morning, just because we felt like it, and we were young enough that we could go to bed then, wake up at 7, and go about our day. We're not that young anymore. We can't do that no more. But I digress. All right, let's move on to the next topic, and that is Luthen and Clea. They obviously had a fairly large part in this arc, playing out the way that it did. What did you think about Luthen and Clea and their goings on during this particular arc, Sean? We'll start with you this time. No passing the buck.
I think Cassian and others view it as Luthen burning bridges, and I think when it's all said and done, Luthen is not going to get the credit he deserves for really pushing, what's now the Rebel Alliance forward. But at the end of the day, I do think he has good. I think he has the best intentions, and maybe doesn't go about it the best of ways. And it's clear that they don't have the vast network they used to. But it's also clear that the door is open for him to go to Yavin. That is mentioned.
Several
and
times.
He's just like, no Yavin for me. I'm going to die here. It's eventually going to happen, but there's more work to be done. And there was something almost sad about that. And you might not agree with the way Luthen goes about things, but without Luthen, in my opinion, the Rebel Alliance never becomes a thing. And he might have rubbed some people the wrong way, and it ruined some relationships. And I just Skarsgård is so fucking good. Like it's yeah. I love the character. I love Clea too. She's really grown on me this year. Sadly, I don't see either one of them making it out of next week.
I don't see how they can without some very serious. I don't want to say reworks, but without some very serious explanation to their part in the future playing out. Somebody suggested earlier doing sort of a tag specifically with Bix, but we'll get to that in a minute. But you would have to spend a lot of time explaining what these characters are doing through Rogue One and through the original trilogy, obviously, because they aren't a part of it and are not mentioned in any way. So it'd be kind of hard to shoehorn a character as important to the growing rebellion as Luthen, and without him being a part of the rebellion proper. Randy, what about you?
Yeah, it's definitely. You can definitely tell that with Luthen and Clea, like it's getting to the point now where desperation to make it work is setting in, to the point of where Luthen is doing things behind Mon Mothma's back to ensure her safety without her knowing it, because he knows how important she is. And that's the thing with this character, is he's willing to sacrifice his soul for the betterment of the rebellion and the demise of the Empire. And he basically said that in season 1. And he's stuck to it the entire way. So the fact that he's willing to just make the tough choices no one else is willing to, in the name of the rebellion, that just goes to show just how dedicated this character is. And seriously, Disney, we need a backstory for this guy. I want to know what the Empire did to this man to get him to be willing to just pretty much throw everything away just so the Empire dies. I need a Luthen series that breaks everything down about this character, because there are so many different nuances to him and so many little intricate details that they've thrown in this character that I need more of Luthen. I need to know what makes this man tick other than watching the Empire fall. Because it's like I'm in for the long haul at this point. And if they decide to just do it in books, I guess what? I'm buying some books, because his character arc in general, even though he's pretty much really never changed the entire series, he's always been this way. We're seeing how the longer the Empire is in power, the more cracks in his surface we're starting to see. And if he doesn't go down but anything but a blaze of glory, I'm gonna be pretty disappointed. I'm not gonna lie. I don't see him going down without a fight. And I'm going to be sad to see him go when the time comes.
Well, I think it's inevitable that they're still on the board and Dedra's still on the board. That something's got to happen there. I've seen theories, no spoilers, so I'm not saying this is. I will say this. I will preface it by saying this technically could end up being an unintentional spoiler, but I don't know it to be. And I've seen theories. Well, the one thing that would drive him is what if Lucen is a Jedi Knight? One of the survivors puts his lightsaber away at the end of it, and that's one of the reasons he wants back at the Empire. And so I got thinking about everything in season 1 and everything in season 2. I'm like, there's absolutely nothing that would rule out him being a Jedi Knight. And also considering some of the artifacts that he keeps in his store too, Padme's crowns in that store too, and we see the Star Killer thing, and not that adds credence to him being a Jedi, but I think it's extremely. I'm not saying he's going to whip out a lightsaber and do a bunch of flips and shit, but I would not rule it out at this point. Think about how Kenobi was living. His lightsabers were buried, and he didn't even use the Force. So the idea, well, wouldn't you? No, he could be hiding in plain sight and does not use the Force anymore.
Spoiler alert, he still has the Force, and he's been using battle meditation this whole time.
I mean, honestly, even though if it's just a theory, it would explain his amazing piloting skills in that one space battle he did. Either that, or he's just
that's a thought that's going to fester. That's a thought that's going to fester. Well,
that's the beauty of this series.
I mean, it's definitely one of those theories that you start, like, when you first started speaking, I'm just like, yeah, stop being an idiot. And then you keep talking, and it's like, well, wait a minute, hold on, wait a minute. And now it's like, what? No, that can't. It's broken my brain a little bit, to be honest. Because I'm now trying to go through and be like, well, but I have no counterpoint.
Sean, you broke Johnny.
All I would say is don't count your chickens before they hatch, but I think
as far as theories go, though, it's
there's nothing that rules it out.
Yeah,
you're not wrong.
It's one of those theories
if you didn't notice, many of the surviving Jedi are quite bitter.
No, you don't say. Yeah, I mean, to me, I don't see a universe where they come out of next week's episode. But I don't know now. It not to say that I think you're right. I just don't think you're wrong. Like, you might be, but I cannot point to any one thing or any one part of the story that could be like, yeah, but what about? And I can't do that. I can't, there's nothing I can point to that's like, oh, okay, well, no, but he has always managed to stay one step ahead of the Empire in such a way that you kind of have to wonder how now. And as you were speaking, that idea of well, maybe, when you're talking about the Force and not using it, I'm like, what if he is? What if he is using, a form of battle meditation, and that's what's allowing him to stay one step ahead? And I don't know now. It's one of those probably untrue. Percentage wise, I'd say that's less than 10%. But
I'll add one more to it. I don't think we've seen it in season 2, but season 1, he has a walking stick that he does not need.
In the words of Lloyd Christmas, so you're telling me there's a chance? And
well, I think there's definitely a chance. It's a possibility.
But no, that's what I mean. It's definitely one of those and it does fit the story in a very interesting way. It sort of explains his finding Cassian and knowing his importance to the coming rebellion. Like, I don't know now. It's
If this turns out true, it's like going back and rewatching season 1 and 2 just to see if you notice any little details that you would have missed that would have kind of tipped his hat that he was a former Jedi.
I mean, I think back to like that when we very first met him in that warehouse with Cassian on Ferrix. I don't know, there was a few times in there where he kind of knew what was coming before it came.
True.
That, like, thinking back on it, it's like, wait, how did he know that? Because I mean, he had the Empire point of entry locked down. Like, he knew which door they were coming through. And that's, we sort of just chalk that up to effective scouting. But what if maybe he felt them there? It definitely paints an interesting what if in such a way that does explain his character's presence in not dying, in sort of a way that, like, he knows that his part of the story is done. He can sort of go be Yoda, like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I guess we'll see. We'll find out next week, or maybe we won't, and maybe we'll just spend our time going, well, what if? Maybe. And this turns into our pet theory that nobody else gets on, because I haven't heard that anywhere. Nobody has said that, and that's saying something in Star Wars, because usually everybody says everything. But I haven't seen it on Reddit. I've not seen it on Twitter. I haven't seen it anywhere, and now that's a thought that's going to fester. Before we let it fester any further, let's move on to the moment we've been waiting for. And we have been waiting for this for a very long time, because we knew it had to happen, and we assumed correctly that it had to happen in this show. I am, of course, referring to the speech. Mon Mothma. We've kind of danced around it a lot and brought it up briefly in different points throughout the course of this review. So, I don't think either of us really have a whole lot more to add, because we've kind of said a lot of it. But, I said it earlier, that speech is both memorable, amazing. It is a performance of greatness. It is a tour de force performance. Genevieve O'Reilly walked in, stood her ground in a performance that was just, I would argue, one of the better acting performances in Star Wars history. Stole the show, stole the moment, stole the story in a way that was just chef's kiss. It was amazing. The build up to it, everything that came after it, all of it. I can't, there's nothing more I can say other than it was amazing. If you haven't seen it yet, go watch it immediately. Even if you're not a Star Wars fan, I don't care. You watch it. It is wow. Just wow. And somehow topical in a way that I did not expect going into it. Like that was something that sort of, I don't want to say caught me off guard, but in a way it sort of did, because it did hit in a way that I didn't expect it to. Like, as me watching it, it hit in a way like, damn, this is something the world needs to hear right now, kind of way. It was an amazing performance. It was amazing writing. It was, I'll say it was the best written Senate sequence in the history of Star Wars. Probably because most of the other major Senate sequences before that were written by George Lucas. And, well, George, I love you, but dialogue is not your best attribute. Okay? I mean, sand, hard, coarse, gets everywhere. You wrote that crap. That's crap. But I digress. I could go down the rabbit hole of knocking George's writing all day, but we don't have time for that. So I'll say that it's the best written Senate sequence in Star Wars history. It's the best performed Senate sequence in Star Wars history. It is everything I needed it to be, and so much more. Randy, what about you?
Yeah, this hits on so many different levels, whether it's fantasy or reality. And I loved that frenetic sense of, you know, Empire trying to shut it down, trying to make sure no one could hear it. And the fact that, again, Luthen and his crew basically being one step ahead and ensuring that what she had to say ends up getting out, at least until she basically talks about mentions Palpatine by name, and that's when it finally gets shut down. But the damage is already done. And obviously, we also know of another speech that she will give in Star Wars Rebels that, that obviously adds to this. But it's just the idea that we got to see a moment that basically, in Cassian's words, welcome to the rebellion. And this was really something that drives the point home of the amount of just fear and abuse of power the Empire used to have this type of control. And honestly, this speech surpassed the president's speech in Independence Day, because that was one of my favorite speeches for a long time. And then this comes along, and it's so poignant, and it's so in your face, and speaks truths that are just absolutely, stuff you need to hear. This is one of those things that when this is one of those things where this is how Star Wars legacy lives on. This is one of those performances that people will be talking about well into award season. I agree with Sean. If anything, she definitely needs a nomination and a win. Her performance in this entire season has been top notch, and just adds to it. And it's just great that we actually got to see it. They went there, and I look forward to kind of see what they do, at least in the next arc next week, what changes and how it impacted the rebellion moving forward. And I think so. That's one of the things I'm really looking forward to for next week.
Ty, buddy, we got to get you on here, man. I don't know if you have availability next week or the week after when it's all over, but it's been a long time. We got to get you on here and get your 2 cents on all this. The distance between what is said and what is known to be true has become an abyss. Of all the things at risk, the loss of an objective reality is perhaps the most dangerous. The death of truth is the ultimate victory of evil. When truth leaves us, when we let it slip away, when it is ripped from our hands, we become vulnerable to the appetite of whatever monster screams the loudest. And then she goes on to call out Palpatine. Jade just asked me, as you guys were talking, what speech did you like better? And I think there's 3 candidates, really. You have Mothma's, you have Luthen's monologue to Lonnie towards the end of season 1, and then you have Marva's in the finale of season 1. But I think you got to give it to Mon Mothma, because 1, she's not dead. 2, she's doing this in front of the entire Senate, the most secure place in the galaxy. And she calls out Palpatine by name, mentions genocide, unprovoked genocide. Yeah, I think you got to give it to Mon Mothma. And, I sat there after episode 8 or, arc 3, episode 2. And I thought to myself, great, this happened in the second episode. Now we get to see the fallout to it. That's good. I'm looking forward to that. And instead, they say, hold my beer, because episode 9 is better than episode 8. And episode 8 is damn near a 10 out of 10. which is why when you put both of them together and then you have episode 7 as the setup, I'll repeat what I said off the beginning of the show. And yes, I'm sure there's some recency bias here, but I've seen it twice now. Okay. Empire number 1, Revenge of the Sith number 2, and Andor Arc 3 number 3 above all the rest of the movies, all of the TV shows. It's mind-blowing. Genevieve O'Reilly was great. The speech, The Escape, even felt like something out of a Christopher Nolan movie. Ty hit it in terms of on the head with the writing. It's just absolutely incredible. I was on the edge of my seat. That is how you create tension without having to have all these big battle sequences or anything. Just watching them walk down a hallway. Johnny mentioned it earlier. The walk and talks in some of the prequel stuff is I don't think they're boring. I'm not critical like that, but
they're boring. I'll say it. They're boring.
They leave something to be desired at times. But that's not the case here. That's not the case at all. And even having seen it twice, I'm itching to go back and see it again. I loved almost every aspect of this episode.
I mean, there's nothing to argue about. It is, the speech was just wow. So let's move on. Sort of, stick with it, and let's talk about the escape. Obviously, there was a traitor in our midst. Bale's team was not.
So you mean Luthen was right and isn't this evil, over-the-top bad guy that doesn't care about anyone else?
Yeah, he definitely proved that in that moment that he can, he cares about the people beyond the bigger picture, because I'd argue from a certain point of view, Mon Mothma, to a degree, became expendable to the rebellion after the speech. And for Luthen to go the extra to get her out of there, either, proves some foreknowledge of she's not, she's still important to what comes next. You put that Jedi thing in my head, and now I can't get it out, that maybe he knows that her part of the story isn't over yet, and knows she has more parts to play in the story, and that's why he works so hard to get her out of there. It was a great thing. I loved the supporting characters throughout the course of that, playing it out the way they did. You got to see a bit more of the ruthlessness of Cassian, which we haven't got to see as much of as I would have expected going into it, especially after Rogue One, sort of painting the picture of Cassian's rebellion as one of, shoot first, ask questions later. We haven't seen that as much as I would have expected, but in this one sequence, we got all of that. Every person he shot was a shoot first, ask questions later, and obviously worked. I thought it was amazing, working the way they did with the ISB agent infiltrating and figuring out right away who was who and what was what, watching that play out, and then, seeing Mon's escape play out the way it did, with them the way that it did. You got to see Mon's emotions play through that moment of, at least in part, being rescued by the one person she has lost her trust in, I'd argue, the most in that moment. A person she thought she could trust inherently was actually, I don't want to say working crosswise to her, but, working in the shadow, as an agent of Luthen. And that definitely played an effect. Like when he said, I'm the last person she wants to see, to Cassian, was true, but it played out in such a way that was great. I love the interplay with Cassian and Mon in the hideout was not something I was expecting. The way that it played out that way, you got to see the lighter side of them. I will admit there was at least a part of me in that moment that thought that Cassian was about to turn over the manifesto to Mon Mothma. I genuinely thought that was going to play a bigger role in the course of the series. After the big deal it was made of back in the beginning of season 1, I really thought that it was going to be more of a central part of the future. By now, it still might be. It might be something that comes up in the last 3 episodes, but I think its opportunity has played out. That we're not going to see it, and it was, a red herring MacGuffin that wasn't as important as we sort of believed it to be. At least me personally, I believed it was going to be of importance, and it's something we haven't seen or heard since. So, but I thought it was great. The emotion, the passion, the way they filmed it. Getting caught in the atrium and escaping the way that they did. Everything about it was great. Either of you who wants to go first? Thoughts on the escape?
So for me, obviously, just the way it was done, the way it was shot, the musical cues, so well done. And it was, I mean, obviously, the outcome, right? It's like we know the goal, we know what's going to happen, but the one thing we didn't know is technically the journey, how they really got from point A to point B. And they did a masterful job of just painting this really just very tense, very at times high energy escape, where at times you begin to wonder, who else was going to pop up, having her driver show up and then Cassian act like, hey, look who I found, and then just blast him out of nowhere. I thought that was great. But it's just like you could see the fear from her, the confusion, and eventually the acceptance. It's like he actually being able to calm her down and keep her to the point of on task. And that's not easy to do with anybody who is legit just scared out of their mind, not knowing what to do, not knowing who to trust. Because at this point, her trust is shaken in everybody. Clearly, Luthen did his job when he's saying, don't trust anybody. But then to see at the end, she's like, I don't know how I can ever repay you. And it's like, make it worth it. And that's, I think that simple line, I think really kind of helped her realize that all she has to do is be the leader she knows she is moving forward. And obviously we saw in how far she came when it was the original trilogy, and even in the New Republic when we got to see Ahsoka. She's really she steps up, becomes a great leader, and leads the rebellion to a victory. And now we get to kind of wait and see. Like I said earlier, we get to see like her actions and everything that's happened in this episode, how it transpires to the 1 year later, and how much it really galvanizes the rebellion and pushes them forward. Because we know that we're getting close to the Battle of Yavin. We know we're getting close to the Battle of Scarif. And yeah, by that time, they definitely seem to be a lot more well-oiled. And clearly after this one speech, and obviously we know she gives another one on Rebels as well. So it's just this escape was great. It was very, very well done, and it did not disappoint. And plus, we got a mention of Gold Squadron, which we all know the Rebels ended up, the Ghost ended up helping them out in the so that still, they didn't change canon, which I was very thankful for. I would have liked to see them come into Yavin after all that, just to get a glimpse of the Ghost. But that's me personally. But ultimately, yeah, so much fun. I just hope that I hope Sean feels the same way.
Well, let's go right to the man himself.
I missed all of Randy's point because my laptop died. So
I know that's why I made the comment.
The escape was incredibly well done. It felt like something out of a Chris Nolan movie. I don't think that's exaggerating. I think the quality was that well done. It's why, for me, I regard it as the third best thing. Like the arc in general is the third best thing Star Wars ever. Um, the writing is superb. The directing is outstanding. The acting is amazing. The set design, the way they're blending in. I forget where they said they filmed that. Spain, I believe.
Yeah.
And with Coruscant, and like for years, I wanted more Coruscant. Coruscant's never looked better. And just the idea that you shot someone in the middle of the Senate building and then shoot someone else and get away with it. You know, I don't think that's luck, Cass. I think the force is on your side, sir, which was what was being hinted at earlier on in that arc. It was sensational, and if we weren't running along, I'd talk more about it. I It delivered in every way possible for me, and then some, and that's really hard to do with me these days.
Yeah, it's, you know, I mean, it was great. It was great. Everything about it, from the speech through the escape, all the way to the end. Let's get to the end of the episode. Yeah, so we don't have the notes, but we got to see the rebirth of K2. That was fun. I enjoyed that. Um, it's something I'd been expecting for a very long time. I was happy to see that play out. Like as soon as the droids popped out on Gorman, you were like, oh, this is where it happens. This is it. This is it. And then you see the, you know, K2 nearly kills him and then gets saved by, the guy in the tank, who's probably the last person I expected to be the one to make the save there. But it was a good moment, a great moment even. And then you see the, Cassian take him back to Yavin and, through Coruscant. I thought that was hilarious when he kind of was like, oh, by the way, I have this killer droid in the ship. Maybe you want to do something with that. They put them back together and you get to see that moment. But just prior to that moment, we have the conclusion of a story. We knew, obviously, or I shouldn't say we knew, but we had assumed that something was going to happen with Bix. Because obviously she is not a part of Rogue One. She is not mentioned in Rogue One. And, the undercurrent of the Cassian Jin thing was very heavy.
No. Cutting you off.
In the
I
ending, it was.
No, you're sorry. You are flat out wrong. And here's why you're wrong. I've already had this conversation today with someone known as Tommy B. There's no kiss. There's no romance. There's nothing. And I quote, I'm sorry I'm about to ruin your rewatch here. Cassian tells Jin her dad would be proud of her. And then they hug because the nuke has already landed and they're about to get wiped out. There's no kiss, there's no romance, there's no hand holding. It's two people about to die, and Cassian opens his eyes at the end. And I think when you rewatch it, you will agree there's nothing there. It's just two people that believe in the same cause. The same cause that Bix believed in, might I add.
I'll have to wait until we see it because I don't know. Again, this is one of those things,
Take it from the guy that's seen it 2 years ago and not 9 years ago.
I mean, I'm not going to argue with that. There's a distinct possibility of, haze in the memory, but to me, I felt an undercurrent of, more than just familiarity in that ending with the two of them. Again, it could have just been, in the moment most. You know what I mean? Like not sort of that. So I mean, I'm not discounting that possibility. And like you said, when we watch it in a few weeks, we'll have a better opportunity. But regardless of that, even if it is illusion and imaginary thing, we know she's not in Rogue One. We know she's not mentioned in Rogue One, and obviously that's a thing. You'd think she would have been mentioned on his, I'm about to die. I know I'm about to die. Maybe I should mention the woman I love, kind of way.
Why? You get to. He can think about it. Why mention it to a complete stranger? Here's my question to you two. There's and I've already asked Randy this before we went on, so I don't think Johnny knows what's coming.
No.
There's a shot in episode 7, and I'm pretty convinced.
In
Tony
episode 7
Gilroy,
Andor or episode 7?
Episode 7 of Andor season 2. Tony Gilroy doesn't seem to do things by accident. There's a shot where there's I think it's when they're talking to the healer, maybe it's just after the healer. The camera very intentionally, what's the focus is her hands on her stomach.
Yeah.
And she also doesn't go on that mission, but Will does, and it was Cass's mission. I think at the very least, I'm leaning 51%, 49% on she's pregnant.
That's entirely possible. I mean, there were definitely times, independent of what you've said, there were definitely times in that where I felt like that was a possibility.
And then the other thing is,
in the end, there, like the last time we see them together, when she sort of gives him the hug from behind when they're sitting in the safe house on Yavin, there was a moment there where I thought that was what she was about to tell him, but then that sort of played out in a way like, well, that can't happen, that can't be possible, and then they played it out the way they did. So it is possible. The thought did cross my mind during the course of the ending of their stories. So that is entirely a possibility. Obviously, personally, anyway, I don't think there's any way Cassian finds out about that. I think he'll die not knowing that. If it is something that is confirmed, it would be, like as was mentioned earlier, in a post credit, her finding out about.
Quick
Cassian's
question:
mission.
Is the next topic in our notes here before we get ready to wrap up? What's next? I don't want to jump ahead here. Okay, so for me, Ty mentions she could die in the next 3 episodes. I don't think we're seeing her again in this current timeline. I don't think Cass is ever seeing her again either. I think now, whether she's pregnant and we see her with kid, I think the very last thing that we're going to see in this show is it's going to be a time jump to post Rogue One. And it's probably going to be brief. And we're going to see her. And we're going to see B2 Emo. And we're going to find out that she went to go get him. Because they were close to. And whether it's the two of them with a kid or just the two of them, that's how I think the show ends. And that she will be the only real character that was made specifically just for Andor on the rebel side that lives through it all.
Yeah, no, that's distinctly possible. I don't disagree. I think you're right that the end of the series is going to be a time jump to like was suggested in the chat. I think it does make the most sense for that to be Bix finding out about Cassian giving his life and the rebellion and what the plans. I don't even know. I think to say that it's jumped to post Rogue One, I would dare go further than that. I think it jumps to post 4.
Well, it might jump to post 6.
I think it's at the very least, I think it's safe to say that it's after the Death Star blows up. I think there's a very distinct chance that it's. See, it's tough because it then becomes who's the bearer of the news. Like that's the question, because I don't think it's something as simple as a letter, a holopad, or something like that, unless they left. We find out that the Rogue One crew, or at least Cassian, left behind in case of death notes.
That'd be cool, and that would make sense.
I think that might be, sort of his response to her letter. If I don't come back from this mission, leave it and it's found and somebody takes it. Again, who would be the person to deliver it? I don't know.
It's also important to
Maybe
note that
Will, if he's still alive, but probably not.
it's important to note that the end of Rogue One to the end of A New Hope is maybe about a week in time.
Yeah, it's very, very short. So I think it is post Death Star being blown up, so that she can have that moment of knowing that you didn't die in vain. You did it. You achieved your goal. You dealt what was essentially the killing blow to the Empire, because they never got back on their feet after that.
I think the real problem with what's next here, fellas, is I don't know how you follow up this week. And I don't think it matters what they do. I don't think it will touch this past week that happened. But if it's better than the first 2 weeks, then they accomplished something. We know one of the events that this again. We're down to we automatically know one of the events that has to happen. They have to find out, not necessarily specifically about the Death Star, but something involving that, because at the beginning of Rogue One, they already know something's going on. They need to figure out that something big and bad is going on in this final arc of Andor. Other than that, I think you're just wrapping up characters, to be honest. Like, Luthen probably has to die. Clea probably has to die. Will probably has to die, right? Like, I think we're going to see a lot of death next week. Maybe Dedrick gets a job on the Death Star.
That one was somebody mentioned that in chat.
Well, at first I thought it'd be Cyril that gets a job at the Death Star, but I've changed it to Dedra.
I believe it was Jerry and Connor. No, not Connor. Yes? No. Lightning McQueen and Jerry sort of made the suggestion that we end with Krennic giving Dedra a new position aboard the Death Star, which would be interesting. Because then that in the end Cassian did get to kill her, which is exactly what they suggest. So I don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. It's just entirely possible that I can't. And again, this is the victim of me having not seen the movie in so many years. But did K2 mention any specific missions he'd been on with Cassian in the film? Like, I feel like there was mention of missions they'd been on during their banter on the ship. But I can't.
There's some references
say
to past events, but I don't think they get into any specifics.
Okay, I couldn't remember if they'd mentioned like they had sort of like a the blank event or the blank incident type comments between the two. I couldn't remember if they had or not. I know they'd mentioned past missions, but I know it's gonna be interesting. There's definitely gonna be a lot of, I don't want to say bloodshed, but it's definitely going to be some death. I think there has to be. Either Luthen is a Jedi or he's going to die. Those are really the only two options at this point that I'll accept.
He's dying regardless. I think it has to happen.
I don't know how you can have him be a Jedi and then die, unless you're going to go for some big cameo.
Well, I think you had Skarsgård give that beautiful monologue towards the end of season 1. He's fighting for a sunrise that he'll never see. Right there, to make that mean what it needs to mean, he has to die next week. I love Skarsgård. I love the character. Like Randy, I want to find out more about the character. Probably be done in novels, is my guess. But he's got to die.
Randy, what about you? What's next? What's in the next 3 episodes?
It's hard to say. Obviously, we get to see a year later. Like I said, the effects of Mon's speech clearly galvanizing the rebellion into getting even more and more together, getting the cells together and being more working well together. But also, we need to tie up some stories, right? Something, do we give Dedra her flowers and let her kind of go off to the Death Star that we know is going to blow up? Or is there some sort of battle where she loses her life or oversteps her bounds one too many times, and they finally had enough and she gets offed? Who knows? I mean, that's the beauty of like characters we don't know, right? Same with Luthen. Does he go out in a blaze of glory? Does someone finally outwit him, which I find hard to believe? It's going, do we get that big bravado scene of him basically just exclaiming everything he's done only to end up just being taken out? There's so much on the table, yet we know that a lot of what's going on is gathering intel and leading up to the start of Rogue One. And I believe that that's kind of what we're going to see. We're going to see Cassian doing missions. We're going to see Cassian, I think, because Bix is and always has been his humanity. Now that she's gone, we're going to start seeing the Cassian that we saw at the beginning of Rogue One. We're going to see him being more ruthless. We're going to see him being just shoot first, ask questions later, no matter what. For the rebellion. Why? Because for the rebellion. It's going to be a real
More
interesting
ruthless. We already seen him kill everyone's favorite taxi driver.
But yeah, I think we're at that point now where I think the next 3 episodes are going to be basically, we're going to see how much more cohesive the rebellion is. And I think we're also going to see the fact that they're going to start using more guerrilla tactics in what they do. Just because.
You know what really pisses me off? Sorry, I got to get this off my chest.
Go ahead.
Remember how I was talking how I got spoiled for 2 things?
Mm-hmm.
Only one of them happened this week.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, good Lord.
What was the thing that was spoiled from this week's? Since we're past it and we know everything that happened. What was given to you prior that you saw? Did you mute yourself or just not hear the question?
And his laptop died again.
I thought he'd switched to his phone, and that's why he missed your comment earlier. All right,
you know what it is? It's Disney Plus, man. They're like shutting him down because he's about to.
Oh no, you can't say
spoilers.
that. Can't say it. No, you can't do that. All right, so while we wait for him to come back, because he's the only one who can end the show. I was going to ask this anyway, but oh, there we go. We got you back. Are you back?
I really don't like this software.
Did you hear the question before you got removed?
I heard you talking, but I did not get the question. Sorry.
Okay, the question was, what was it that you were given? You said you had something from this arc and then something that's in the next arc. So what was the thing from the arc we just saw?
Karn.
So I'm assuming it was him after being beaten up just before he got shot photo?
No, he was already dead.
Oh. All right, then. I'll have to remember next week to ask you what it was you got that ruined your final arc thing. But all right, before we go,
it's a bigger one than that. I'll say that.
Okay, well, I don't need to.
Okay.
I'm going to say this: it's not Luthen with a lightsaber, and you're just fucking with us, and you already know that he's a Jedi.
I promise on my kids, I do not know definitively if he's a Jedi or not.
Okay. All right. Well, either way, it still would have been fun. Before we go off really quickly, I got to ask you guys: final 3 episodes. Is there a cameo in their back pocket for these 3 episodes? We know we're on the doorstep of Rogue One. There are a lot of characters now that are in play that weren't before. So, are there any cameos in this? We got the mention of Gold Squadron, which we know to be, the Ghost and crew. Is there a cameo in the final 3 that we don't know about? If this is, I don't want to say if this is what you know, Sean. I abstain, but that would tell us that there is something. So,
No, it's not a cameo. That what I know.
Okay, good. So, do you expect to see any cameos in the final 3 episodes?
No, I don't, because that's just not Tony Gilroy's crutch. But if there is, I'm gonna go with a recast of young Leia.
Ooh.
That's a good one.
That would be interesting.
I mean, considering by now she's definitely a part of it, so.
Has anyone seen a recent picture of Vivian Lyron Blair? Can she pass for that age yet? I haven't seen any photos of her in recent years, so I don't know how. She's what, 13, 14, something like that now. I think she would be from her age when Obi-Wan came out. I think
maybe. Huh. I'm just trying to think of what would be a good cameo. I mean, obviously, if you're really going to go cameo, you could always go with the easiest one to throw out there, and you could just have C-3PO and R2 show up. You know,
I will admit I thought there was a chance we'd see them during the speech when we had Bale doing his speech. I thought there was a chance you'd see 3PO standing behind him.
Yeah, that's beyond that. I mean, I guess you could, since we know, since we saw that the Ghost was a part of the Battle of Scarif, you could always see Chopper running around somewhere or something simple that they can get away with, that they don't have to worry about someone having any dialogue. It's just in the background. There he is, and there he goes, foul-mouthed little bastard. You know, it's who is like the best droid. So let's be honest, Chopper's attitude is beautiful.
Give me Chopper and K2 having a conversation with each other, and I may actually need to change my shorts watching the episode. I'm just saying.
That would be pretty entertaining, to say the least. I can see it. Cassian, do you know what he just said to me?
All right. But yeah, I mean, I'm with Randy. If there is cameos, it's probably someone from Rebels. Whether that's, Chopper or Zeb, or, even possibly Hera. But, if there is, it's somebody from the Ghost crew. Or just the Ghost itself, even.
Or even the Phantom, for that matter.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another possibility. All right, guys. That is going to do it for this week's episode. We definitely went longer than we planned to off the rip, but that tends to happen with us.
It also helps that there was three good,
a lot
really
to talk
good
about with
episodes.
A lot of there was a lot of meat on this there bone, and I think we were, all right, that's gonna do it for tonight's episode. Randy, where can everybody catch you?
Currently, you can find me over on X at Giggity Giles, and obviously Tuesdays here.
And Sean?
I've decided I'm retiring from content creation after these 3 episodes of Andor. I've hit the peak. we can't outdo it.
I'm sorry, that's not an option. You made me go through the crap. You have to stick through the good.
Well, I mean, there's a part of me that is worried that, like, even though I liked Ahsoka season 1, and I don't think all Star Wars needs to be, Andor, which is, probably the best comparison is probably Game of Thrones, to be honest. But the writing, I love Filoni, but Filoni doesn't write like this, and not many do, from what I understand. So I'm having a real hard time with. Oh no, am I going to get let down now?
Hold on. I can bring you back. Rory McCann is Balin Skull.
Yeah, hey, I mean, just the fact that Andor season 2 is primarily location shooting and not stagecraft will help out with the quality of that show for sure. But I hope we get another Andor-esque show down the road. What era it's in, who knows? But judging by the fan reception and not the crazy people that Lightning McQueen was mentioning, and honestly the critic it's rare when you get the fan reception and the critic reception agreeing, but like I don't, I'm on my phone right now, I don't know if Johnny can whip up Rotten Tomatoes, but like at one point, Andor season 2 was at like 50 something reviews, I think, with a score of 98%. It's probably dipped a bit because that's a pretty hard score to maintain. But like, this thing should win Emmys. And if it doesn't, it's the stigma of having the title Star Wars in front of it.
I have pulled it up. It is certified fresh, 98% on the tomato meter, and 81% on the popcorn meter.
98% by critics. That gives me hope come award season.
I'll say this. I was skeptical yesterday because as we were recording our normal show before we watched it, the IGN review popped up on my Facebook feed. They'd given this arc a 10. I was a little skeptical going in because 10's a 10, right? It's a 10 is a 10. And I personally don't give out 10s for anything, but that's that goes back to little Johnny, that nothing is perfect. Practice makes perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect is the exact quote. And of course, Sean will know exactly what I'm referring to when I say that. But, nothing is perfect. Everything, it can be almost perfect. It can be near perfect. It can be close to perfect. But nothing
It's as
is ever
close to a
truly
10
perfect.
as you can get in today's day and age, in my opinion.
And this was as close to a 10 as you can get in Court Me. I don't know, I don't know where it rates, in the all-time stars, because it's hard to rate a 3-episode arc versus a film, but
Is it though, when the 3-episode arc really,
that's
if
what
it
I'm
was
saying.
edited
When you put
together,
the
is
time
basically a film?
together, like that, I think you can safely make a case for top 3 from that.
I will not be shocked if they edit these 3 episodes together, wait
Yeah.
for a slow month at the movie theater, and go, here's our movie version of it.
Yep.
Maybe they add in a couple of deleted scenes to get some asses in seats, but
Yep. There's
I
definitely that
think there's a
distinct.
real chance that happens.
There's definitely that distinct possibility. All right, we're wrapping it up. We're saying good night. We're saying see you next Tuesday. Wait, hold on. That doesn't mean what it usually means when you say that phrase. Well, I digress. Before we go off, we got to say a big thank you to everyone who likes, subscribe, comments, all that stuff. Chat tonight has been popping. We appreciate every single one of you for giving us your time this late on a Wednesday night. So we appreciate each and every one of you guys for every comment, every message, every like, every subscribe, all that stuff. We love you all. We appreciate you all. But big props to the channel sponsors over on Patreon, patreon.com/. Is it still Fandom Empire?
Yes, for now, yes.
Okay, patreon.com/Fandom Empire.
And you know the reason why it's not going to change
Yep.
anytime
Yep.
soon.
Yep. I just wasn't sure because I knew we were talking about April 1st for that change, but I didn't think we'd actually gotten to it because of, again, real life things happening in the background, and, the wheels of motion on those sites is slow turning, so it never happened. But patreon.com/Fandom Empire. If you enjoy the content and you want to contribute over there, we appreciate each and every one of you that do. And if you don't, that's fine too. Give us a like, give us some subscribe, help us out with the algorithm here on YouTube, and help us show up in your feed and in your page. And you'll see us when we pop up for content. So to each and every one of you guys, watch this now, watch this tomorrow, watch this whenever you're watching this. We appreciate each and every one of you, and we love each and every one of you. So thank you for that. Like, subscribe, thumbs up, notification bell, all that fun stuff that helps keep you coming back to us for future content. For Randy, for Sean, I'm Johnny. You can catch me here, there, everywhere, as always. You can also catch me in my off hours, twitch.tv/pros4pros. This, I think, Friday night, I'm starting a playthrough of Viking Frontier. It is a new city resource management crafting kind of game, which is right up my wheelhouse. So we're going to be doing that this weekend. Twitch.tv/pros4pros. But of course, here every Tuesday night, between 8 and 8:30, depending on the winds of time and whether or not there's a Leafs game. At Tuesday nights, 8 to 8:30 p.m., somewhere on that. So keep your eye here on that feed. So we'll see you guys next week. We appreciate each and every one of you and look forward to the final arc of Andor Season 2 next week. Have fun, enjoy it. We'll see you next week, and may the Force be with you all.